Welcome to the Astranti Law YouTube channel. Today we're going to be talking about commercial awareness, and specifically how you can improve yours to impress a future employer. So, what is commercial awareness? Commercial awareness is, as it sounds, having some awareness of the commercial world. And when we think about that in relation to law, we're often thinking about how we can be more aware of what is going on in the legal world, or how the current news informs what's happening in the legal world, and then what we can do about it and what changes that's likely to make. So not only are you aware of what's happening, but you're also aware of almost having the ability to make predictions about future trends. The other question is, why do so many law firms think commercial awareness is so important and emphasize it quite so often as a part of their interviewing process, or as a really vital skill for lawyers to have? And the answer to that is commercial awareness is a lot about understanding the world your clients live in and the things that they want from a legal professional. And once you understand that, that makes you very valuable to any kind of law firm, because then you are aware and able to anticipate client needs, and you are able to communicate with them in a way that they understand about their world. So it's essentially about knowing how businesses make money, what kind of challenges they might face, and how legal issues are going to impact them. Why have two companies just merged together? What's the purpose of that? And what sort of issue in the market is that perhaps responding to? Or what opportunity is that seizing? It's all about knowing those little things. So how do you develop that over time? So our step one is to make sure you're following the industries you actually care about. If you're someone who wants to go into, for example, medical law, you're not going to want to know about what's going on in, fashion or anything like that. Although maybe you will, maybe they're making new fashionable scrubs. But try and think about what you're actually passionate about, because you're going to be reading these stories typically to develop your commercial awareness in an ongoing sense. So it's not something you can just do once and go, yep, I've got commercial awareness now, I'm commercially aware. Obviously it's the news, it's going to keep changing. So you need to be continually interested in the trends that are happening in order to maintain a genuine interest and enthusiasm and a want to look further. And if you're not interested in that, then perhaps looking at a commercial career isn't necessarily for you anyway, because ultimately you're going to be spending a lot of time doing that in your career. So commercial awareness is almost like a way of getting started. So as some examples there, if you are someone who's into tech, try and follow tech companies. So think about Apple, Google, Meta, and see what kind of legal issues are happening there and how they're ending up playing out. What are some common trends that are happening in that industry? Similarly, if you're into fashion, think about tracking luxury brands and even then not luxury brands to kind of see the difference there. And think about how maybe sort of things like intellectual property law might impact them, or environmental legislation. There are all sorts of different trends that are happening in different industries, and you need to be able to sort of track them with a genuine interest. So remember, businesses are always impacted by law, whether that be data privacy, maybe that be intellectual property, it could be competition law, it could be anything. It could be, as I said, new environmental legislations, it could be copyright issues. Businesses are continually affected by law, and therefore you need to be thinking about business with a legal, almost like a tint to your glasses. Like you need to have some sort of a legal reference point to be looking at these news stories from. Tip number 2 is to consume business news in an intelligent way. So rather than, for example, looking at the Financial Times and every single day you pick it up and you read the entire thing, don't worry about doing that. That's going to take up way too much time for it to even be useful. You won't be able to digest the information, you won't be able to form any rational conclusions from it necessarily unless you dedicate all of your time to it, which you probably can't do. So instead think about what you could do in a sort of bite-sized chunk, maybe every day, every other day if possible, depending on how much depth you need. And pick some sort of sources, like for example the BBC Business section. You could look at the Financial Times' free newsletters, so something that they maybe send to you and it's just a quick snapshot, or different podcasts that might be useful to you. So just have a look around and see what kind of sources you would actually see yourself realistically using day to day. This is a habit you need to build more than anything else. And another tip that I have is thinking about LinkedIn. LinkedIn is really good for seeing where current lawyers might be commenting on trends and how it impacts them. And it's great for following things like law firms and legal professionals who post about deals and legal developments. And it's this real-time commercial awareness that's happening. It's free, and a lot of the time they've done the thinking for you. So while you might be reading a news story and having to think about how that's going to impact the legal world, in this case, a lot of the time they will have already told you, because they're the legal professional and they're already seeing it play out. So LinkedIn is a really, really valuable resource. Tip number 3, and we've already touched on this a little bit, but it is to connect the news to the law itself. So just because you're looking at the news and looking at the Financial Times and you know what's going on, doesn't necessarily mean that you're actually connecting it in a meaningful way. So if you're, for example, reading about a news story that's about big tech regulation, and that could be something to do with GDPR, it could be something to do with more physical things like hardware changes, or it could be to do with the regulation of online spaces. Either way, you need to be thinking about how that's going to be impacting big companies. And then you need to think, okay, so if it's impacting a big company, what kind of legal issues are likely to be involved with that? And how might a law firm advise that company as a client in this situation? How are they going to talk to a client about what's going on? And how are they going to provide a service to them? Would that be explaining what's going on in the law, because your job as a lawyer is often to break down what's going on? Or would it be maybe thinking about how you could advise them for the good of their business in dealing with that new legislation? So it could be all sorts of different types of things that come up. That's just one example, but you need to make sure you're connecting the news to the law. Tip number 4, and really, really useful for basically any interview, even if it's not about commercial awareness, is using case studies. And what I mean by that is you've already done all the hard work. You've already looked at the news articles, you've already sort of related them to the law. Now you just need to come up with some examples of when you've done that. So if, for example, you were going to be talking about commercial awareness, and you might say something like, I followed X's merger with Y, and I noticed that law firm Z advised on regulatory approvals, or something like that. That's a really good start to a case study. And then you need to think about, okay, so what did you learn from that case study? So what learning has come about from you doing that research? If you're able to do that, then that shows that you are already putting your commercial awareness into practice. And therefore, it's not just an awareness of what's going on about you, but it's also thinking about having that deeper analytical skill and the ability to see how things link together. So you're not just reading headlines, you're digging deeper into how law firms are actually involved in those headlines. And tip number 5 is to talk to people and to attend events. So if you're talking to people regularly at events, then that's where you're going to get a lot of word of mouth commercial awareness. So things including law firm events, webinars, careers fairs. Try and ask some key questions. So you might ask, for example, how does commercial awareness relate to your day-to-day role? What industries do you focus on? All sorts of things like that. Law firms want candidates who are genuinely curious and proactive. So get out there and start those conversations is the best way for you to learn. So there you have it. Those are our 5 key tips on how to boost your commercial awareness, and that hopefully will stand you in good stead for any interviews you might have coming up, and also just for life in general as a lawyer. If you want any more tips like this, make sure you like and subscribe and click that notification bell so that you can see more of our videos. We've got lots of good stuff about becoming a lawyer and how you can go about developing your legal skills.